My ex was better in bed than you'll ever be, she spat in betrayal fight, so I calmly packed my bags. Then she sent me a panicked text, I'm pregnant and he wants nothing to do with us. Imagine thinking you'd survived the worst heartbreak only to discover the universe had a far crueler lesson waiting, one that shatters your entire world, not with anger, but with a quiet, devastating truth. This isn't just about a breakup, it's about the kind of lie that makes you question everything you ever felt, everything you ever were. It all began, innocently enough, in a university seminar room always thick with the smell of dry erase and stale coffee. That's where I first saw Chloe, and in that moment, the mundane scent of academia transformed into something electric, something that promised an entirely different future. She slid into the seat beside me, her hair a wild escape from a messy bun, tapping a pen against the desk like it was conducting the room. Then she whispered, "Tell me you did the reading because I absolutely did not." I laughed, too loud for something so small, and said yes. And she grinned like we'd already been friends for years. Later, when the professor asked for presentation volunteers, she nudged my elbow and stage whispered, "You have a trustworthy face. Go save us." And I went. Because with Chloe, everything felt possible, and just a little bit funnier than it should have been. We were 22, and the campus felt like a stage where the light always seemed to catch someone's future. I was the quiet guy who thought in bullet points, and she was a color-coded calendar come to life, except her colors were moods. For reasons I still don't fully understand, she took an interest in me. She'd stay after class to walk to the cafeteria, point at my coffee and declare, "You drink that tar on purpose." Then she'd steal a sip, make a dramatic gag, and finish with a smile. We became a pair by accident, or maybe just pure momentum. A study session would turn into an evening, then a weekend. Before I knew it, I was the first person she texted when she saw a dog in a sweater or when she burned toast and wanted to blame the toaster. The first time we kissed was under the ugly fluorescent light of the library lobby, because the snow outside had turned to glass, and nobody wanted to risk the walk. She tugged my sleeve and said, "You're overthinking this, scientist. Just kiss me." And I did. It was clumsy and warm and real, like finding a porch light left on for you in a neighborhood you didn't even know you belonged to. Those first months were loud with laughter, which is funny to say because I'm not a loud person. But she turned me up. That's the only way to put it. I started saying yes to things I would have normally avoided, like trivia night where she shouted answers at the wrong table and then bowed, declaring, "I am a humble scholar of bad guesses." Or karaoke, where she convinced me to murder a 90s power ballad while she screamed encouragement like a coach, "Hold the note like it owes you money." Even cheap road trips, taking pictures in front of the world's largest something or other, captioned with nonsense like, "We were here, and the here was enormous." I'd pretend to roll my eyes, all while secretly saving every single moment, archiving a life in advance. We graduated in that strange season where everything changes at once, and the future turned into a spreadsheet plus rent. We found a basement apartment with a slanted ceiling and a shower that refused to pick a temperature. In those first weeks, we called it cozy, without irony. We bought a second-hand couch and declared it a throne. She stood in the doorway, holding a potted plant she'd impulsively named after our landlord, announcing, "Behold, Frank, the guardian of our deposit." We laughed, and I thought, this is how the rest of it will be. Hard and light at the same time, like lifting a grocery bag together. The edges of the real world were sharper than we'd rehearsed, though. Stress came with its own vocabulary, deadlines, bills, commutes, expectations. I learned that when Chloe was tired, she became flinty, a spark that craved kindling instead of calm. When I was tired, I grew quieter, which she sometimes interpreted as distance. Our early arguments felt like bad improv, where we were both trying to say yes, but ended up saying, "You're not listening, and I don't know how to say it." Then we'd just stop, because we weren't practiced at not being happy. Somewhere in there, a name began to orbit us, like a streetlight flickering at the edge of your vision, there, but not to be stared at. The name was Alex, her ex from the year before me. He first appeared in anecdotes that sounded harmless. He used to drive too fast. He loved a band I also liked. He hated cilantro so much it was a personality trait. I nodded, because people have histories, and you can't be jealous of the sky for having clouds. She'd shrug and say, it's just context. And I told myself it was. But then, context developed a pulse. Alex's name popped up more often, not as nostalgia, but as a measuring stick. She'd say, Alex always insisted on hardback books, but I like paperbacks because they're messy, like life. And I'd say, okay. Or she'd mention, Alex used to text me good morning at 6 a.m. He was psychotic about mornings. And I'd force a laugh. Or when we were assembling a wobbly shelf, she'd mutter, Alex hated instructions, he'd just brute force it. I'd keep the smile on my face, as if mine could hold back hers, but inside, a quiet room began to open, the room where you store the mirrors you don't want to look into. I tried to meet the comparison with more effort, which is the slow way to drown. I took on extra shifts, learned her coffee order by season, booked a weekend away at a cabin where the main amenities were silence and a porch. For a while, we found our old rhythm. Listening to rain tick on the roof while she leaned against my shoulder and said, see, this is what I mean when I say I want simple. And I believed her, because I wanted to. Because belief is a muscle you can overtrain until it snaps. The cabin glow didn't follow us home. The weeks after grew brittle around the edges. She started going out more with coworkers to a bar with sticky floors and excellent fries. I told myself that people need circles bigger than one, that it was good for her to laugh with others. When I'd ask how the night went, she'd brush a strand of hair behind her ear and say it was fine. Jessica's dating a disaster, and Sam's allergic to commitment. The bartender looks like a poor man's Hemsworth. I'd grin, and she'd add, Alex would have hated it. Too loud for his fragile sensibilities. I'd nod, while the quiet room inside me dragged a chair to the center and asked me to sit. There were good days still, because endings are never only bad moments lined up like dominoes. We did groceries together, arguing over cereal like we were on a game show. We folded laundry in a competition she named the sock draft, pointing at the clean heap and shouting, best 2 out of 3. Pick your champion. I'd channel a broadcaster's voice. And announce, in the left corner, striped ankle rogue seeks redemption. We'd laugh until the heap became a memory. And then, a week later, I'd find her on the couch staring at the dark TV, absent in a way that suggested she was elsewhere entirely. If I asked what was wrong, she'd say, nothing. It's just a day, with that finality people use when they don't want you to knock on a door they're bracing shut. The night it happened wasn't special until it was, which is how most stories work. We both came home late, me from a client meeting that drained me, and her from drinks with coworkers that seemed to fill her up. The apartment felt smaller than usual, as if the slanted ceiling had decided to lean closer and listen. I asked if she'd picked up the package we needed for the presentation clicker I'd ordered. She said she'd forgotten. I said it was okay, because it was. Then she rolled her eyes in a way that knocked something loose in me. I feel like lately you're somewhere else, even when you're here, I said. She responded with a shrug you could cut your hand on. I just want to know what's happening, I pleaded. What's happening is you're suffocating me with your melancholy, she shot back. I'm asking you to let me in, I said, my voice rising. She laughed, not kindly, and said, you want in? What does that even mean? It was the first time I truly felt like a stranger in my own kitchen. I tried again, slower, because my instinct is to pick the lock, not kick the door down. I feel small when you bring up Alex, like I'm playing a game I didn't know I signed up for. She set her glass down hard enough to tally a point for gravity and snapped, oh my God, not this again. I'm not accusing, I clarified. I'm telling you how it lands. She paced a little. There was a flash in her eyes that I recognized as fear disguised as anger. Then she exhaled a laugh that wasn't a laugh at all and said, you're so insecure. It's exhausting. Maybe I am, I retorted, but I didn't start that way. She took a step toward me, the way you step toward a cliff you're testing for echoes. At least Alex knew how to make me feel something. I felt the floor tilt, the ceiling tilt, the air tilt. And then she said it, clean and cruel, like a blade set on a white table, "My ex was better in bed than you'll ever be." It didn't land like fire. Not at first. More like a sudden winter. Everything quiet and brittle. There was a moment where I thought I might try to fix even this, because that's who I had trained myself to be, the guy who could logic a storm into a drizzle. But the silence in my chest had more authority than her words. I realized that I didn't have to stay where I was being taught to doubt the simple dignity of being myself. I didn't have to carry a measuring tape into bed, or into breakfast, or into any other room of the rest of my life. I wish I could say I delivered some perfect line that would make sense of it all. But I didn't. And maybe that's the point, because wisdom sometimes looks like doing nothing where you would once have done too much. So, I picked up my backpack from the chair where it always lived, set it on the table, and methodically began to fill it with the things I'd need to not come back soon. She blinked as if I'd told a joke in a language she didn't speak. Then she scoffed. "Oh, so you're leaving? That's mature." I zipped the bag without a speech. "You're really going to let one comment ruin us?" she challenged. I thought about all the comments, the name like a ghost invited too often, the small dismissals, the way care had slowly become something I had to beg for instead of something she offered without calculation. I didn't correct her, because this was not one comment. This was the floor plan of a house we'd been pretending wasn't full of drafts. I went to the bedroom and pulled my suitcase down from the top shelf. I'd always needed a chair to reach. For once, I didn't hesitate to clatter the chair across the hardwood. I folded clothes with the tenderness you reserve for things you want to survive the trip. I took the book from my nightstand, the watch my father gave me when I started my first job. The hoodie she always stole and never washed? I left it, because I didn't want to take something we'd turned into a tug-of-war. While I packed, she followed at a distance, a commentary running under her breath, "This is insane. You're making a scene. Grow up." Then louder, "You can't even talk about it like an adult." I kept packing, because in that moment, I was finally talking about it in the only dialect that mattered, which was leaving. I texted my friend Sam to ask if I could crash. He replied with the simple grace of real friendship, "Key under the mat. Do what you need." I put the suitcase by the door and grabbed my toothbrush from the bathroom. I looked at my reflection and saw someone I hadn't seen in months, maybe years, a person not negotiating with his own worth. I felt a kind of shaky calm, like after a fever breaks and you realize you're sweating because health is returning in waves. In the kitchen again, she tried a different tactic, softer but not sincere. "Daniel, wait. Just sit, and we can figure it out." I wanted to be the guy who sits forever until the problem budges. But I also knew that love is not a court where you have to present evidence that you deserve it. I said, "I don't think we have the same definition of enough." For once, she didn't have a line ready. The quiet that followed didn't hurt. It clarified. I picked up the handle of my suitcase and my backpack, and the keys that jangled like punctuation. I opened the door that stuck slightly in damp weather, and I stepped into the hallway that smelled like everyone else's cooking. For a second, I listened, in case there was something worth turning back for. A sentence or sigh that said, "We've been working on the wrong puzzle." But there was only the hum of the building and my own pulse, confirming the decision like a signature. I walked to my car under a streetlight that flickered at the exact wrong moment, which felt fitting and cinematic in a way that made me roll my eyes at myself. I put the suitcase in the trunk and sat in the driver's seat, not starting the engine, hands on the wheel like I might bend it into a circle of protection. I breathed until the trembling slowed. I thought about that first day in the seminar room, and Chloe's pin tapping, and the way she said, "Save us." And I realized I'd tried to save us so hard I'd almost forgotten to save me. That thought didn't taste like victory or failure. It tasted like water after a long walk. I drove to Sam's place with the radio off, the night giving me space to inventory what I had and what I was leaving behind, and what I'd probably miss in a week when memory decided to edit the footage. When I got there, the key was exactly where he said, and the apartment smelled like laundry and basil. I put my bag down and texted him a thanks and a promise to explain later. I lay on the couch, not sleeping, not crying. Just alive. The kind of awake that feels like starting a language you've heard before but never really learned. At some point near morning, I realized the quiet eye. And my head had changed from absence to presence. It wasn't dramatic or poetic. It was just mine. That night, I didn't just pack my bags. I packed every last piece of self-respect I had left. When I left that night, I thought it was the end of the story. The closing credits rolling over a quiet apartment and a flickering streetlight. But life doesn't end just because you decide you're done with someone. It keeps spinning, pulling you forward, even when you're not sure where the next frame begins. The first few days after leaving Chloe felt like walking underwater. Every movement slow and heavy, every sound muffled by the echo of her words. I stayed at Sam's place, sleeping on his couch, surrounded by his gym equipment and half-eaten cereal boxes, pretending I was fine because he didn't know how to handle silence. He'd pat my shoulder and say, "She'll regret it, man." I'd nod, even though I wasn't sure I believed that. I didn't want her regret. I wanted peace. And I didn't even know what that looked like anymore. Mornings were the hardest, because that was when routine used to matter. The shared coffee, the lazy smiles, the quick goodbye kiss before work. Now I just scrolled through my phone like it was a lifeline I didn't know how to use. Sometimes I'd start typing her name, just to see it on the screen, before deleting it like a superstition. My body remembered her schedule before my brain could catch up. I'd think, she's probably walking to the station right now, or she's ordering that stupid lavender latte she pretends to hate. And then I'd remind myself it wasn't my job to know those things anymore. A week passed, then two. I didn't reach out, and she didn't either. The absence became its own presence, loud and constant, like a buzzing light you can't turn off. At night, I'd replay the argument in my head, word by word, tone by tone, dissecting where it went wrong, wondering if I could have said something, anything that would have kept her from going for the jugular. But every time, the conclusion was the same: some words, once spoken, are designed to end things. By the third week, I started going back to the gym. It wasn't some cinematic redemption arc. It was mostly because I needed something to fill the hours between not texting her and not sleeping. The rhythm of weights and breathing helped, and slowly the noise in my head began to soften. I ran into an old classmate there, Emily, someone I hadn't seen since university. She remembered me as Chloe's guy, which stung a little, but she was kind enough not to dwell on it. We ended up talking on the treadmills until my lungs gave out before my sadness did. She said, "You always look like the calm one in your relationship." And I laughed, "Yeah, calm like a lake that's drowning a city underneath." She didn't laugh, but she smiled in a way that said she understood. Work became my safe zone. I buried myself in deadlines and projects, stayed late, volunteered for things no one wanted to do. My boss called me reliable, which was corporate for quiet and convenient. It didn't matter. I needed the distraction. Every now and then, I'd catch a scent that reminded me of her shampoo, or see someone wearing the same jacket she had, and my heart would jump like it hadn't gotten the memo. Healing is not linear, no matter how many motivational posts tell you it is. It's messy and repetitive, like trying to fold a fitted sheet made of memories. Months passed like that. I moved into a small apartment closer to work. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. The first night there, I sat on the floor eating takeout from the container, looking at the blank walls, and realized I wasn't sad, just empty in a manageable way. That was progress. I even called my parents for the first time in ages, trying to sound normal. My mom asked if I was seeing anyone new, and I told her, not really. And she said, "Good. Learn to be alone before you try to be together again," which was the wisest thing she'd ever said, even if she didn't mean it to be profound. Then, one random Tuesday night when I was halfway through reheating leftover pasta, my phone buzzed. It was her name, Chloe. My stomach dropped so fast I had to sit down. The message was short, shaky. Daniel, I didn't know who else to reach out to. I'm pregnant. It's his. He wants nothing to do with us. For a minute, I just stared at it, rereading the words until they blurred. Then I laughed, not because it was funny, but because the world had the worst sense of irony. The woman who once told me her ex was better than me was now pregnant by him, and he'd abandoned her. It should have felt like justice, but it didn't. It just felt sad. I didn't reply that night. I didn't know what to say that wouldn't sound cruel or condescending. Part of me wanted to tell her she'd made her bed, but another part, the part that still remembered her laugh, her warmth, just felt sorry for her. I barely slept, my brain running laps between anger and pity. The next morning, I typed out a message, I'm sorry you're going through this. I hope you have support around you. Then I deleted it. It sounded too detached, like something you'd write in a condolence card. Instead, I just put my phone face down and left it there. 3 days later, she texted again. Can we talk? Against my better judgment, I said yes. We met at a cafe halfway between her place and mine, one of those quiet corners of the city where people come to pretend they're okay. She looked different, tired, softer somehow, like the fight had drained out of her. Her eyes were red, not from crying right then, but from crying recently. She gave a small wave and said, hey, like we were old friends bumping into each other. I just nodded and sat down. We talked in circles for a while. She told me Alex had left her as soon as she told him about the pregnancy. He said he wasn't ready, that it wasn't part of his plan, she said, bitterness bleeding through her voice. I asked, and what's your plan? She just shrugged. I don't know, Daniel. I thought maybe we could talk. There was something in the way she said we that made my stomach twist, like she was trying to slip me back into a role I'd already quit. I told her gently, I don't know how I fit into this anymore. She nodded, but her eyes said she wanted me to. A week passed. Then another message. This one was shorter, but sharper. I think I was wrong. The timing. Maybe it's yours. I froze. My heart did this weird flip. Half terror, half hope. I read it again. Maybe it's yours. The logic didn't even make sense. She'd said it was Alex's. But logic doesn't live in the same room as emotions. The possibility hit me like a wave I didn't see coming. What if she was telling the truth? What if I was about to be a father? I didn't respond right away. I needed time, but time was exactly what I didn't have, because every hour that passed made the thought dig deeper into me. I started picturing it. Her with a belly, me beside her, doing ultrasounds, learning to build cribs. It was insane, but my brain didn't care. For the first time in months, the empty space in my life had shape again. It wasn't joy exactly, but it was something like purpose, and that was dangerous because I'd missed that feeling too much. Finally, I called her. She picked up on the first ring and said, Daniel, like she'd been waiting. I asked if she was sure. She hesitated and then said, not completely, but it makes sense. The timing, everything. I didn't want to tell you at first because I thought you'd hate me. I told her I didn't hate her, and she started crying, quiet and real, and I felt my chest crack open again, the way it used to when I still loved her. We started talking more after that. Every few days, a text, a call, an update. She told me about doctor visits and morning sickness, and I told her about my work and how weird it felt to maybe be a dad. She laughed once and said, you'd be a good one. And I didn't correct her. The truth is, I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe we could rewrite the ending, that the ugliness could fade into something worth salvaging. People like to say you can't go back, but sometimes your heart doesn't know there's a forward to go to. Sam warned me not to get pulled in again. She messed you up, man, he said. Don't let her do it twice. I told him I was just trying to do the right thing, but he didn't buy it. Maybe he was right. I was trying to be noble, but maybe I was just lonely. It's hard to tell the difference when you're still healing. Weeks turned into months, and our conversations became softer, easier. We weren't together, not officially, but there was something between us again, familiar, fragile. She'd text things like, "The baby kicked today," or "I miss talking to you before bed." And I'd feel that dangerous warmth spread again. One night, she said, "Maybe we can start over after the baby's born." And I didn't answer right away because the idea scared me, but also because part of me wanted it, too. I started imagining it, the two of us in a small apartment again, only this time wiser, calmer, with a baby that carried pieces of both of us. Maybe we'd finally get it right. Maybe everything before was just the messy prelude. Hope is a stubborn thing. It grows even in the ruins. Still, there were cracks I pretended not to see. Sometimes she'd slip up and mention Alex in ways that didn't fit the new story. Once she said, Alex would have freaked out at the hospital bill, and then quickly changed the subject. Another time, I noticed she still wore the bracelet he gave her, the one I remembered because she used to twirl it during arguments. I wanted to ask why, but I didn't. I told myself it didn't matter. People hold on to things. But somewhere deep down, the quiet room in my head started whispering again. Even so, I let myself believe, because after all the hurt, the thought of a second chance felt like oxygen. She sent me ultrasound pictures, little blurs that looked like hope. I started saving money, looking at apartments with one more room. My mom cried when I told her I might be a father. "She's lucky to have you," she said. And I wanted that to be true. The last message of that chapter came on a Sunday evening while I was cooking dinner. She texted, "Thank you for being there. I don't know what I'd do without you." And I smiled at my phone like an idiot, stirring the pasta, thinking maybe the worst part of my story was finally over. But life, as always, has a talent for timing. I didn't know it then, but I was standing on the edge of the truth that would burn everything down again. I thought I'd survived the worst pain a person could feel, but the universe was about to remind me that there are always deeper versions of heartbreak, quieter ones, the kind you don't see coming until you're already in the wreckage. And this time, it wouldn't be anger that broke me. It would be honesty. When some time had finally passed, life started to look almost normal again. The chaos had quieted. The sharp edges of memory had worn down. And somehow, against all reason, Chloe and I had drifted back into each other's orbits. We weren't officially together, but it had started to look that way. We'd fall asleep on the phone, talk about baby names, share playlists like we used to. She even sent me pictures of her apartment redecorated, softer colors, fewer sharp edges, as if she was trying to prove to both of us that she'd changed. And maybe she had, or maybe I was just seeing what I wanted to see. When she asked me to come to her next doctor's appointment, I said yes before I even thought about it. Sitting in that waiting room, surrounded by the quiet buzz of machines and the smell of disinfectant, I realized I hadn't felt this close to her in almost a year. She smiled at me the way she used to, that half smile that started on one side and slowly took over her face. "Thanks for being here," she said. And I told her it was no problem, but what I meant was, it feels good to matter again. After the appointment, we went for coffee. She ordered her usual lavender latte, wrinkled her nose, and said, "Still hate it." I laughed, and for a moment, it felt like the clock had rewound, and we were those same two people from university again, teasing each other about caffeine and bad life choices. I didn't realize I was falling back into the same rhythm, the same loop of wanting to fix something that had already proven it couldn't stay fixed. Over the next few weeks, I spent more time at her place. There was always something comforting about the smell of her perfume mixed with vanilla candles. She'd talk about the baby constantly, the nursery colors, names, how she wanted to be a cool mom. I found myself daydreaming, too. I could see it. Me holding a tiny hand, her laughing beside me. It was fragile, but it was something. And after everything, something felt like enough. Sam didn't see it that way. You're setting yourself up to get crushed again, he said one night when I told him about the doctor visit. She's different now, I countered. And he gave me that look only a friend can give, pity mixed with frustration. She lied before, Daniel. Don't forget that. She was scared, I offered. So are you, he said quietly. And maybe he was right. But fear wasn't enough to stop me anymore. Around her 7th month, she asked me if I'd consider moving back in, just temporarily, to help with the baby stuff, she said, eyes hopeful. I hesitated, but when she added, it would mean a lot to me, I agreed. I told myself it was the right thing to do, that father should show up, even if the circumstances weren't perfect. Living together again was strange. Everything felt familiar, but slightly off, like walking through a dream version of a place you used to know. She cooked dinner most nights and hummed to herself while chopping vegetables. And I'd find myself watching her, wondering if we were actually getting another chance, or just building a prettier version of our old disaster. Sometimes late at night, I'd catch her scrolling through her phone with a small, secret smile. When I asked what she was looking at, she'd shrug and say, just baby stuff. I didn't press, though a small knot of unease began to form. I told myself I was paranoid, that this was what trust looked like. But trust isn't blind, it's quiet observation. And something about her quiets didn't add up. One evening, I came home early from work. The lights were off except for the lamp in the living room. I heard her voice before I saw her. Soft, quick, a little nervous. I know. I just couldn't tell him yet, she was saying. I froze. There was a pause, then laughter. Hers, and another woman's. Her best friend, Jessica. He actually thinks it might be his, Chloe said, her voice lower now, more serious. God, I just couldn't handle being alone after Alex left me. Then laughter again. The words didn't hit all at once. They landed slowly, like pieces of glass finding the floor. He thinks it might be his. Alex left me. I just couldn't handle being alone. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. The sound of her voice, once the warmest thing in my world, felt foreign now, like it belonged to someone I'd never known. I stepped back quietly, every part of me numb. I didn't want her to see me. Not yet. I went outside, sat in my car, and just stared at the steering wheel for what felt like hours. My body was still. My mind was chaos. The truth has a strange way of being both devastating and clarifying. It didn't feel like heartbreak this time. It felt like realization. Eventually, I went back inside. She was in the kitchen making tea like nothing had happened. Hey, she said with a bright smile. You're home early? Yeah, I said, my voice flat. I heard you talking to Jessica. Her face went white, then pink, then still. What? Don't, I said. Just don't. For a second, she looked like she might cry, but instead she sighed, tired and small. Daniel, I was going to tell you. No, you weren't, I interrupted. You were going to let me keep believing it until it wasn't convenient anymore. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I didn't mean for it to happen this way. That's the problem, Chloe. You never mean it. You just do it. The silence that followed wasn't angry. It was dead. The kind that tells you nothing left here is alive. She tried to reach for my hand, but I stepped back. Was it ever mine? I asked quietly. No, she whispered. I nodded. That was it. The truth, small and simple. The kind that doesn't break you. It just ends you. I packed my things that night. She didn't try to stop me this time. Maybe she knew there was nothing left to save. When I got to the door, she said, Daniel, I'm sorry. I turned to her, not out of anger, but out of habit. You didn't just lie to me, I said. You lied to the version of me that still loved you. Then I walked out. I drove with no destination, just the road unfolding endlessly in front of me. The streetlights blurred into lines, and my mind kept replaying everything. The laughter, the hope, the ultrasound photos that suddenly meant nothing. It wasn't rage I felt. It was something quieter, heavier. Acceptance, the understanding that some people don't change, and loving them doesn't obligate you to keep burning for their warmth. I ended up at the beach. It was late, the sky thick with stars, the air sharp with salt. I sat there for hours, listening to the waves, letting them fill the silence she'd left behind. The ocean didn't care who lied or who stayed. It just kept moving, tireless, endless. I think that's what peace feels like, not happiness, but the absence of noise. In the weeks that followed, she tried reaching out a few times. Messages that started with, "Can we talk?" and ended with silence when I didn't reply. I blocked her number eventually, not out of spite, but to protect the fragile quiet I'd fought to reclaim. I learned that closure isn't a conversation, it's a decision. I started therapy, picked up running again, even joined a book club at work. The kind of small, ordinary things that build a life. And slowly, the world stopped orbiting around her. Some mornings I'd catch myself smiling at nothing and realize it wasn't because of her absence, but because of my presence in my own life again. A few months later, I heard through a mutual friend that she'd had the baby, a boy, healthy. Alex wasn't in the picture. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel regret. Just a quiet wish that the child would grow up learning the honesty his parents never mastered. Sometimes late at night, I still think about how close I came to stepping back into that life. How easily love can blind you when it's dressed up as redemption. But love without truth is just a story you tell yourself to avoid loneliness. I'm done telling that story. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that walking away isn't weakness. It's wisdom earned the hard way. I left her twice. Once out of pain, once out of peace. The second time mattered more. The last time I saw her, months later, was by accident. We were both crossing the same street from opposite sides. She looked thinner, tired, holding a stroller. Our eyes met for half a second, and she gave a small, uncertain smile. I nodded, not in forgiveness, not in anger, but in recognition of what we'd been, of what we'd destroyed, of what we'd survived. She looked away first. The light changed. I crossed. I don't know if she saw it, but I was smiling. Not at her, but at the fact that I finally understood what it meant to be free. She once compared me to her past. Now I realize I was her future, the one she threw away. And for the first time in a long while, I felt peace. And I didn't need her text to get it. This experience changed me fundamentally. What do you think about how I handled things, especially that second chance I almost gave? Would you have reacted differently? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious to hear your perspectives.